Drop the beat.
I'm a never Trump guy. I'm a never Trump guy. I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him. I'm a never Trump guy. 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 I'm a never.
Hey, good afternoon. Sorry for the costume change, but I was sick of dealing with my hair, so I just chopped it all off. So my apologies if this view is a little bit shocking. We will be talking with PF Jung momentarily. I will be jamming trail mix into my mouth because I haven't had an opportunity to really eat today. So gotta do what we gotta do, Kings. Gotta handle it. But how are you, Beef Supreme? How are you doing today? Good. Epic is what I like to hear. So, bald men for the win. True. So, sorry if I'm jamming trail mix into my mouth, but I'm actually starving. And what I was going to say, I had the conversation. Looks like we are about 2 weeks out from launching the other two channels, which, I'm not going to lie. It's mildly disappointing, but to be honest, they're taking the project super seriously and they want to dot the I's and cross the T's. And also they're being very generous with their support. So, you can't complain when the other people are being like nice, professional, setting realistic expectations, all that kind of stuff. But I would say mid-month, we should be launching the channel. Matter of fact, we might just launch without them. We might just do it depending on how Travis is doing. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, probably 80% of my income right now comes from a channel called Counterpoints 40K. It's where I break down the universe of Warhammer 40K. It takes about 5 hours worth of week per 5 hours a week for each episode for me to do work. And it takes about 5 hours a week for my editor to do work in order to get it done. And so realistically, it's not like a huge amount of effort. And so as a result of that, somebody approached me and they said, hey, if we were to give you capital, what would you do with it? And I basically told them I would open another two channels. I would do Counterpoint Sci-Fi and Counterpoint Star Wars. So we're in conversations effectively in order to subsidize the editor so we could launch those other two channels. And then the game plan is to run it for a year and then, see what's going on with it. And if it's going well, then basically we'll come up with like a rev share idea that makes everybody happy. And then boom, we're in business and we're doing three channels, 3 breakdown channels and 25 hours a week of political streaming that then gets chopped up into VODs. So overall, pretty cool. Lots of cool stuff going on. And then today for PF Jung, we actually did have FD Signifier pop in a chat real quick. And I actually did enjoy breaking down another centrist perspective because effectively, like, I probably overlap with Sitch and Adam 70%, 80%, somewhere in there. They're actually probably the closest to me politically, but they, at least Adam anyways, he flipped a switch in his brain where he just decided that he could do apologetics for the Trump admin, and I'm not going to. And so that creates like enough of a gulf content-wise, priority-wise, politically-wise, where I think there's enough interesting insight there where I can agree 70% and then viciously disagree at the last like 20 or 30%. Kind of like how leftists like to cannibalize other leftists and it's always good drama. Maybe I should cannibalize centrists because I am the best centrist. It's true. B Supreme says FD. Yeah, FD Signifier. He was in chat earlier when we were reviewing him talking to Sitch and Adam. And I had to scroll really fast because I had to get to a meeting. But it seemed like he had some contention with what I was saying. They're not really centrist, are they? No, I think Sitch actually is. They don't like the term centrist. What centrist is supposed to be is if there's a political binary, which some people reject in its entirety, but let's say there's an issue and there's two opposing perspectives. There can be multiple opposing perspectives, but let's just say there's two. If there's two opposing perspectives, rather than defaulting to, this is my political tribe, therefore I'm going to agree with them on everything, it's more like, I'm going to consider the opposition. I'm going to consider the side that I'm more favorable to. I'm going to evaluate the arguments, and I'm ultimately going to decide what I think is correct, regardless of tribal affinity. And I think Sitch does that.
Personally, I think Sitch is a fucking scumbag.
Yeah, what a fucking asshole.
Just kidding. Greetings, Connor.
Me too. I love Sid. Are you streaming or are you just hanging out?
I'm not streaming. I was. If you give me your,
you don't have to. You don't have to.
If you give me permit,
we can.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna record it on my end.
Yeah, record it. And I'm sorry that I'm jamming trail mix into my face, but I haven't eaten anything today, so I'm legitimately starving.
I will forgive this deep transgression that I take extremely personally.
All right. Give me 1 second. I'm going to jam this handful into my mouth, and then we can do an intro. Matter of fact, I'm going to do an intro, then I'm going to have you do your intro, and while you're doing your intro, I'm going to jam food in my mouth.
Tight. Oh, are we live right now?
Yes.
Good, okay. Well, that would make sense. Otherwise, you'd be talking to yourself about Sitch.
Yeah. Well, hi, guys. My name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran. Today, I got my special friend, Paul, on. He's going to have to tell you what he's all about, but effectively I would say that previously when we spoke, he identified as a centrist, a fan of Jordan Peterson, a fan of Jung, and so we need to check in with each other because it's been a few months since we've talked, especially one-on-one. So I wanted to check in and talk about politics, specifically the Trump admin, and then also whatever floats our goat today. So Paul, can you please introduce yourself to the folks at home?
Yes, sir. Nobody loves floating goats more than I do. My name is Paul. I am of the YouTube channel PF Jung Jung, which I should probably alter in the title, which I will as I speak. And I serve the meme known as radical enlightened centrism, which basically means that I think that the left has a lot of good points and the right has a lot of good points. And I also think the left has a ton of degenerate freaks weighing them down, and I think the right has a ton of degenerate freaks weighing them down. And all the cringe, moderate, kleptocratic apparatchiks who are in the pockets of the military-industrial complex, the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, the university-industrial complex, the financial complex, all this bullshit. Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, they are not the ones who are going to usher in the revolutionary reforms needed to make the world a better place.
Which is hilarious because we're descriptively like aligned, and then I default to the military-industrial complex and the pharmaceutical-industrial complex and the financial-industrial complex, and
yes.
I defer to the institutions that presently exist, whereas you,
I'm deeply populist.
Yeah. So actually, that's kind of interesting. And can I ask, who did you vote for in this previous election?
Jill Stein.
Are you serious?
I drove 10 minutes, paid $10 to park at the Dallas City Hall to cast my vote for someone who I knew full well would never win in 10,000 years, 40,000 years, one might say. Because my point, first off, I was in Texas, so it didn't matter who I voted for at all, because it was going red no matter what. Despite, it's purple right now. It'll be purple maybe in 4 years or 10 years. But Jill Stein, because I wanted to send a message. I'm tired of seeing dead Palestinian children on my timeline. I think what Israel is doing is terrorism, and I think it is the primary driver of anti-Semitism, a primary driver of many problems. And so, given that my vote was pointless anyway, I wanted to send the message, hey, there's a bunch of people who are so upset about this issue that they're willing to go throw their vote away just to send a message. And that's the kind of person I'm doing.
So, let's actually do that, because I think geopolitics is probably the main thing that we disagree on.
Yeah.
I do feel like, though, were you engaged in memetics on the timeline when you were doing some Trump apologia? Did you actually believe in some Trump apologia? Did you believe in some of his policies?
What is Trump apologia? And
effectively saying, hey, all the blue-haired liberal progressive freaks are misrepresenting what's actually going on in the politics du jour.
I don't think I've ever uttered those lines before.
Okay. Well,
I have. Maybe... If you're asking me, did I believe in?
How do you feel about Trump and the Trump admin? Let me ask that question instead of putting words in your mouth.
I think they're awful.
Do you think that a Kamala presidency would have been as bad as the Trump admin?
I don't know, but probably not. Or I don't. Wait, hold on. I don't know is the correct answer, and it would have been as bad. It could have easily just as been worse, because we could have also sucked Israel's eggs and still had an open border.
Okay. What? Let's.
But hold on. To your point about just quick to the point about the Trump apologia. Okay.
Yeah.
I think explaining to leftists the reasons, or at least making the case for why Nice. Nobody loves hair more than I do. Making the case for why people would vote for Trump, because I know many people who voted for Trump and I argue with them all the time. I think that's a useful exercise, right? Saying, hey, actually, it's okay to be against illegal immigration, and it's okay to, whatever. I'm so sick of it. I can't even think of the examples or whatever. I think that's fine. I think saying, hey, there are valid reasons to have voted for Trump, and I wish the Democrats were not so fucking stupid as to put up a candidate as incompetent as Kamala. I would have absolutely voted for Bernie Sanders. And I look forward to donating to, as I've already done, and campaigning for Thomas Massie, who the Trump administration has created a super PAC just to try and get unelected. And I would say, fuck the Trump
I
administration.
did see that, which, sorry if I missed.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You're like, about time, buddy. Listen. Nobody hates Donald Trump more than I do.
Well, I don't think that's true.
That's true. Of course it's not. But it means I do believe it's important to steelman him so as to better able to accurately criticize him for the things he deserves to be criticized for.
I guess my frustration with the steel man, which I think a lot of liberals and progressives got more exhausted of the steel man than I did more quickly, is we have things like let's just look at the first 120 days, okay? The tariffs are actually a delegated duty to Congress, but they in turn can delegate to Trump. And he took that authority and he ran with it, and he erased $4 trillion from the international economy. Then he started the mass deportation operations, which is technically, within the purview of the executive government. But as an example, he took Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who's an accused gang member. He sent him to Sukkot against a protective order. He refused to bring him back for months. Yep. And now we have, at least according to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, like torture going on in Sukkot, like physical torture.
Correct.
And where they were beaten, had their hair cut, where he lost a whole bunch of weight, using food, using sleep deprivation techniques, all that kind of stuff, all at the whims of the guards.
Yes, disgusting.
Now, whether or not that's true, who knows?
Bad.
So, and then you also have like the drawdown in the Ukrainian war. You have the simping for Israel and Gaza, all that kind of stuff. So I guess my question is, like,
what would Kamala have done better?
Yeah, because for me, I think she would have been way better on Ukraine. I think she would have been way better on Israel. I don't think we would have the human rights abuses that we have. And you're right. Maybe we would have that, the push-pull factor of an open border. We wouldn't have had the immigration stuff. But is that worth what we're currently doing to the Republic?
So there's a bunch of things. Maybe we should just pick one topic and start, and then not jump around. So
let's start with mass immigration, because that seems like the one that you're most, that we could probably agree on the fastest.
Yeah, I think illegal immigration is bad.
Why?
You tell me why. Hold on. Do you disagree?
Mildly.
You disagree that illegal immigration is bad?
No. Let me steelman it. Okay. So the reason why mass immigration is bad, or mass illegal immigration is bad, in my opinion, is because it creates a black market economy. Effectively, our corporations are able to make an economic underclass that they don't have to pay well. They don't have to give benefits. They can abuse. They can do this and that. And then not just that. Typically, the way that a nation state operates is it has citizens who have some form of identification, who have a tax buy-in to their state. And therefore, there's an expectation of allegiance to the state, as long as the state is protecting its people's interest. And so I feel like it breaks economic contracts and it breaks social contracts.
Agreed.
So that's my beef with mass immigration.
Yeah.
However, what I would say, though, is looking at the actual people who have come into the United States, I think that the MS-13 gang-banging, layabout, drug-dealing, murdering piece of shit is probably 1%, less than 1% of the immigrant population. Yep. And 99% of them are people who are working in agriculture and construction. And so I'm worried about, like, my approach would be secure the border, obviously. And then it would be to evaluate the people we have here, give the people who can do seasonal work visas, give the people who can do work visas, and then deport all the bad apples. That's what I would do.
That's what I 100% agree. I'm radical centrist on this. Not close, but strongly restrict the border,
secure the border,
give amnesty to the people who have made it here already, more or less. Obviously, not the single males.
if they're good people and socially and economically productive.
Correct. But if someone's been here for 8 years, and they have kids, like, fuck that. It's not worth deporting them. I'd say it's immoral, even though it's legal. It's funny. The anti-Trump people will often say, "He's breaking the law. He's breaking the law. That's what makes it illegal." It's like deportations are legal. It's like fuck that. I don't give it. Legality is not the measure by which I evaluate if something's moral or not. So I think the deportations are immoral. Now,
so do you agree, relatively speaking, with my immigration fracturing the economic and social contracts of America, which is what the problem is? It's not that we have too many Hispanics as neighbors; it's the fracturing of the economic and social contract.
It's the destabilization, it's the disintegration of a cohesive culture, which is a necessary thing for a nation.
I know you probably mean that earnestly, but I think some people would read that as a dog whistle of I don't like Mexican music.
Yeah, good for them. I hope they read it that way.
Okay, but I'm asking, and I don't care about the answer. I'm not
black people and Mexicans who have been here are more American than the white fucking progressives who say we should have communism.
Okay, based.
Okay, but guess what? Somalians who don't speak any English are not as American as any of those people. And if you have people who don't speak English in our country and literally are working as an underclass, it's not good for anyone. It's also not good for the original countries, which we are incentivizing them to flee instead of fix, which is insane. Oh, yeah, we'll just take anyone here. Come here. Your country's falling apart. It's run by gangs. Instead of doing anything about it, we'll just let everyone flee, which further fucks over people there. And then we'll just pretend that, you can just come in and then, you can go work on
you're a social underclass, and then you integrate over generations, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I need to read this for True Zealot real quick. Just got back from the VA urgent care. I like to engage with my chat. I know a lot of streamers don't. That's fair. And was diagnosed with a perforated eardrum. The cause, doing one too many cannonballs at my daughter's behest last night. Didn't even know that could happen. Stay safe out there. True. Yikes. Well, I'm happy you were playing with your daughter, and that's how you perforated your eardrum. Based. So, all right. So I would say that, relatively speaking, we agree in reference to immigration, where it's secure the border, integrate the people who are here who are worth integrating, deport the people who aren't worth integrating.
Correct.
Or incarcerate, depending on crime.
Yeah.
And then that's effectively it.
And I don't think Kamala Harris would have done that. I think she would have let the border remain open as Biden allowed.
Sure. But now, so let's put that aside, because we agree on policy description and we agree on policy prescription.
Okay.
One of the things that worries me about the mass deportation operations as they're happening right now is the economic impacts that are going to happen from taking Hispanics, who effectively, like 40% of the construction industry is estimated to be immigrant labor, like illegal immigrant labor. I want to say 20 to 40% of the agricultural industry is also estimated to be immigrant labor. Mm-hmm. And so we just got done with 2 or 3 years of pooping our pants about inflation. And so what's going to happen is by eliminating immigrant labor immediately from these industries, we are going to have price shocks in the construction industry and the agricultural industry. What do you say to that?
Probably. And that's bad.
And should we just suffer on it for moral principle?
We should definitely not have slave labor and indentured labor as a basis of our economy. I agree with you. We should give them work visas.
Okay.
Right?
Then we agree enough that there's not a fight there, because basically I would say Trump, like, I make fun of Trump and Trump sycophants because he says, well, we're going to reduce our crackdown on agriculture, hotels, and whatever.
Because
and so
told him to.
I post the "fell for it again" meme over and over again on my Twitter timeline.
Yeah.
But realistically, I agree with that assessment. It's just that some of us have been saying for like a fucking decade, if you mass deport 10 million people out of the labor force, which heavily subsidizes 2 key industries in America, then you're going to screw up the market. And it seems like Trump just figured that out last month. Yeah.
I think illegal immigration is bad. We should give visas to the people who are here already, fine, and then have like a moratorium on immigration for like 40 years and give everyone time to assimilate. Because otherwise you have more and more people who don't speak English, who do not share our culture, who, just because you abide by the laws does not make you an American. right? American identity, American culture is this very amorphous thing. It's like black culture. Is black culture a real thing?
I think so.
Okay, I do too. I think American culture is a real thing. Can you define it precisely? No. Can
No.
you point out endless numbers of exceptions? Yes. Same with black culture. But there is something that is American that is worth protecting. And it's not race-based, but people who come here from countries that are entirely foreign, have entirely foreign traditions. It's like that is weakening the social fabric.
Okay.
And I think that's bad.
Well,
Among other things,
DD22
among the national security issues of letting fucking a bunch of Chinese fucking agents come in and all that stuff, it's like,
I do appreciate the Chinese doing spies now, like spy shit. Now that whenever there's a security issue, I don't have to point immediately to jihadist terrorism, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're a racist because Middle Eastern and North African people." I'm happy Chinese people have been stealing IP and stealing like government secrets. That way, I can be like, "No. I'm not just bigoted against Middle Eastern and North African people for terrorism. I'm also bigoted against Chinese people for intellectual property theft and government secret theft."
there you go. Yes, that's very radical centrist of you. Hold
Yeah,
on. Even though I am racist towards the jihadis, I'm also racist towards the Chinese. So it's even to everyone. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Bigoted about lots of people. So DD22E says, nah, I don't buy this, that you would say this about the millions of non-English speaking Germans who came here during the 18th century.
Correct.
But he meant 19th century.
Yeah,
But what's
and then
funny
assimilated.
is, I would say integration needs to be an intentional policy.
Correct.
And also DD22E, I have to presume you already know the Ben Franklin quote where he says, we're taking in so many Germans so quickly that if we do not integrate these people into our culture, then the American project will die and it will no longer be an Anglo project, but a Germanic one.
And look how that
It's
turned
almost a
out in the
direct
20th
quote.
century. So
Yeah. So then, all right. So what is it about America that is worth saving? You didn't actually say what that is. So I'll go first and then you should answer that question. I would say that I like republicanism, like representative democracy. I like freedom of speech and freedom of conscience, not just as legally enshrined, but as concepts that allow us to espouse our ideas without fear of persecution. I like the right to self-defense up to and including against the government because I think it's realistic about what power is. And then I like a limited government, which is effectively like enshrined in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States, where we say we are not a nanny state, grave to cradle. The government can just intrude on your life at any moment and screw you over for any reason. We actually have a fairly rebellious private culture that says if the government steps too far, we will actually riot, revolt, rebel, and that's part of our culture. So those are the things that I think are American and cool. What do you think is American and cool?
America is my country, and I feel an allegiance to my country and my fellow countrymen, regardless of their race. And that's enough for me. In the same way of like, well, what's it about? What is it about your family that is worth loving? It's like, well, they're my family. I don't really need to answer that question. Well, this is my nation. Like, I just have an affinity towards my nation and my fellow citizens. I'm a civic
Boris
nationalist.
wants us to jump to Zog, but I want to build up.
We will.
To it.
Don't worry.
Yeah. So I actually think that we're probably like 95% aligned on immigration. You think that Kamala could have been worse? I would cite all the Trump issues that Trump is worse on. Let's go international.
We could even ask what would be worse: allowing all the illegal immigration to continue, or deporting a good chunk of them, like what Trump is doing. I would say allowing it is worse.
For me, the egregious violation. So, for instance, like bringing in a bunch of illegal immigrants, 99% of whom, in my opinion, are going to be working class folks who integrate into American culture and who participate in the construction.
This is where we disagree.
Okay.
At a there's a certain threshold number of people where you get enough people together, you create cultural enclaves that are entirely separate from the United States. I now know multiple people who have like walked into their local grocery store, asked 3 different employees, hey, where's the XYZ? And none of them spoke English. I've encountered that here, where it's like, holy shit, I'm surrounded by people who don't speak English. What? Not surrounded by people, but like there are a lot. And it's like, well, hold on. How can we say that they're part of the same culture? We have the same common myths, the same common underlying beliefs, the same common, moral codes that are like unique, the same social customs, the intangible things that make up culture.
That's a problem. I have faith that we would be able to integrate these parallel cultures. So, for instance, like you could say,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I mean, we'll probably end up agreeing. But I have so Central America and South America, in my estimation, from a historical analysis, is a product of two cultures, relatively speaking, maybe three. So there's obviously African slaves, but there's also indigenous Americans and there's Spanish colonizers, right? Those are like the three dominant cultures in South and Central America.
Right.
Well, in the United States, we also have indigenous Americans. We just killed 99% of them. Then we have Northern Europeans, so like Anglos, Irish, Celts, whatever. We have some Mediterranean Americans, and then we also have black slaves. And so I view these cultures as parallel, where if the difference between us is that Hispanics like siestas and Mexican food, and they have some, colorful dances and this, that, the other shit, but they're still ultimately a Spanish colonial project, then we are an Anglo colonial project, and we should be able to synthesize a culture between those two.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
If you don't speak English and you root for Mexico over America and you wave Mexican flags at the ICE protests, you're not an American.
Sure.
Culturally.
But what I would say is those people have kids who then go to American public schools, and the American public schools should be indoctrinating,
amen,
integrating
assimilation,
their children into the American project.
And integration. Yes, but my point was, that's why I said there's a threshold phenomenon where you can get to a point where actually no, that then ends up not happening, where there's enough people here who don't speak English that you don't actually need to speak English to be able to live in the country. That's a problem. My friend in Minnesota, it's a lot of Somalians up there, and a lot of them are Muslim, obviously, and they were very intentional about gaining enough seats on. I think it was in Michigan. He's referring to. There's some city in Michigan.
Yeah, Dearborn.
Yeah, but they canceled the Pride Parade because enough Muslims got on the what do you call it? The city council, where they're like, yeah, fuck this. We're not doing this anymore. And it's kind of like,
wait, hold on, but isn't that potentially based? Isn't that democracy in action?
Not necessarily, because I don't consider democracy the fundamental aspect of American culture. I consider freedom of speech, freedom of expression, the ability to be gay is part of it. So I don't, if a bunch of anti-gay people democratically took power and made being gay illegal, I would not consider that a good thing. I would consider that a failure of democracy.
And to be clear, I don't consider it
I know you don't. I know.
a gay thing. I don't consider it a good thing either.
Yeah, the fucking gay thing. The trans thing, too.
I also
the
think
transing the kids.
There's an element of, so here's the thing. There's an amount of like societal privilege that I feel like we freak out with whenever there's something that challenges the way that we perceive the world. Right?
Sure.
So, for instance, like we're just used to every metropolitan area having a gay pride parade to celebrate the gays. And by the way, if you're gay in my chat, sorry for offending you. I love you, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is that oftentimes progressives, lefties, liberals, they're all like, oh, we can take infinite amount of people from Middle East and North Africa, and we don't even need to get them to integrate.
Right.
And they'll just be as American as warm apple pie within a few months.
Yeah.
And then I feel like this is the shock that I like. That kind of shows like even progressives and liberals, they have to be like, hold on a second. These people are social conservatives. They actually have religious reasons why they're hostile to gay folk. Yeah. Oh shit. We can't take 10 million of them within a year, let them create ethno-religious enclaves, and then expect them to integrate into the tolerant, broader liberal project. And so while this could be negative, I hope that the shock to the zeitgeist is ultimately positive.
Yeah, I would say if you come into this country and you do not self-identify as if your strongest sense of identity is not an American, and you do not view yourself as an individualist, then you're not an American. So if you and that's sort of the it's like liberal tolerance and colorblindness and all that, that works if everyone else is playing the same game. But if people come in here and say, okay, all of you Americans can play the colorblindness, liberal tolerance game, but we're going to come in and play the I'm a Mexican first, I'm an Indian first, I'm a Muslim first, blah, 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 all these things that are not like American in terms of culture. Like Indian culture is different from American culture, and Mexican culture is different from American culture. Well, then we can't just play the liberal tolerance game. I think there is that's the beauty of ethnogenesis and assimilation. Is like there is an American Hispanic thing that's unique to America that we can create, and also like Black Americans are like almost the quintessential Americans in some sense, because it's like, you know, historically stripped of their homelands or whatever, and they are uniquely
Black
American.
Americans. We were talking about them earlier.
Yeah, sure. And same with the waspy ass people from fucking, what do you call it, Mayflower times and shit. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Well,
that's different though.
DD22E says something that I actually disagree with. Okay, so stop enabling the guy who's defunding the education system that's supposed to do the assimilation lull. The founding fathers would shoot you for saying that. I disagree. Which founding fathers? Exist. So, well, no, I would say which founding fathers, because for instance, it's my understanding that Hamilton was somebody who believed in a central government that was powerful enough in order to actually like rule the United States and govern the United States, where Jefferson imagined that we were all going to be subsistence farmers on our own 10 to 40 acres of land, and we were just going to spread out and all be rugged individualists who provided our own food to ourselves on a day-to-day basis. Yes. And that we ultimately should have no say over what our neighbors do. So while I agree that Hamilton probably won the cultural discourse and the political discourse, Jefferson would totally be against like compelled ideology of a nationalist vision forced down by the federal government. There's plenty of Americans who would hate that. And there's plenty of Confederates who would have hated that as well. So, yeah. So which Americans, which politicians? Andrew Jackson would have disagreed with you too. So, all right. So hold on. We agree on integration. We agree on immigration. Yeah. We agree on securing the border. We probably could fight about like what was worse, Kamala versus Trump.
It's all counterfactual. So.
Ukraine, because this is where I
don't have an opinion on Ukraine.
You don't have an opinion on Ukraine that you want to share?
I no longer share my opinion on Ukraine. I'm not educated, not informed enough to have an opinion to.
Okay, then let's go abstract. How do you feel about American interventionism on the world stage since World War II?
How do I feel about it?
Or, I mean,
I don't know. I'm not educated enough to give you a good explanation.
We've been the world police since the end of World War II. So how do you feel about our role as
I don't know. I mean, I think we've caused a lot of problems, like in Libya and virtually every country we've destabilized. It's probably not great.
Okay. So what I would argue with you, which you don't need to come my way on, because obviously there's a lot of people in the right wing who feel the way that you do, is that America in the 20th century through the Cold War confronted authoritarian communism, both in the Soviet Union and China, that ultimately our arms race and our tech race and our economic race with the Soviet Union ultimately collapsed the Soviet Union. And by the way, this involves intrigue like deposing Mossadegh, the guy in Iran, because a third of the world's oil sits in Iran, right? And he was a socialist who wanted to get it. Nobody's corrected me so far, so I'm going to presume this is true. He was a socialist who wanted to nationalize the oil and likely fall into the Soviet orbit. And we stopped that.
Right. Which is arguably, I don't know. You can't, so I'm familiar with that. To say that was like a good thing for sure is a stretch.
Well, I'm not saying it's a good thing for sure. I'm saying like it's a realpolitik lesser of two evils. Like power abhors a vacuum.
Maybe, but the cost of doing that is you turn the entire world against you and they make them hate you for it.
I don't think the entire world's against us.
Or that region specifically. Like Iran is.
I don't think that entire region is against us.
Iran does not like America. Even the people who are anti the Iranian regime. You know,
Saudi
like the original.
Does. Jordan does.
Right, the Saudi leadership does, yes.
Saudi leader, we could be specific and say the leadership does, sure. There's plenty of people in the Middle East and North Africa who resent and hate us and would kill us if they could. There's also plenty of people in the Middle East and North Africa who are happy to work with us because we make them rich. My argument to you is regardless of whether or not they like us or hate us, they sit on 2/3 of the world's proven energy supplies, and therefore who controls where that energy goes and how is critical to the future of the planet.
Maybe you could make the case that had they, let's say, nationalized their oil production and we had reduced our oil intake, we would have adapted as we have done with electric cars. And obviously we wouldn't have the technology to do it back then. But like, we live lives of incredible fucking abundance. And the idea that we need to go to war and commit coups and just intervene in order to maintain our consumerist, degenerate, hedonist lifestyles, I take some issue with. I'm not saying for sure I'm right.
Well, I was going to say it sounded like you were making the luxury and the wealth sound positive for a second, and then it sounds like you made it sound neutral or negative. I would argue
I think
that
at this point in the history, innovation is largely a bad thing for humanity.
is largely
In the consumer side. When it comes to consumer, a lot of innovation, you're right, innovation in general, obviously is not. A lot of innovation is bad for humanity. Stuff that we would consider like, oh, this is GDP growth and abundance. Like, for example, Klarna, the ability to go into debt to pay for DoorDash.
Yeah.
That's worse for humanity than it is better.
Oh, I think that's like raw economic parasitism, 100%.
Correct. Okay. And I think that's a lot. I think almost everything having to do with apps, everything having to do with better filters that make children more insecure and make them spend more time on apps. I think anything in the app-based service economy, a lot of it is complete parasitism. And we are drowning in abundance. And I would be happy to sacrifice a good chunk of that abundance for less hatred from many people and less killing of Iraqis and Libyans and all that.
I'm going to do the weakest form of argumentation possible, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Okay.
The appeal to hypocrisy. Okay. You and I are two decently educated, middle-class kids.
Allegedly.
I don't know what
you're educated. I'm not.
Okay. I don't know what your upbringing was like. But the point is...
Yeah, certainly upper middle class for sure.
Okay. So we're middle-class kids who got raised by the right people, probably went to okay schools, and as a result, we were smart enough in order to cobble together entertainment streams and YouTube videos that are good enough in order to allow us to make some money off of the internet. Okay. Yes. And so in order to do that, we have plastic and rubber and petroleum and paint, and all of the debauchery and degeneracy of the Western world is what enables us to make a living.
Yes.
So why would we reject the abundance and wealth that allows us to fulfill our dreams?
Because if it comes
and why are we dooming other people to not fulfill their dreams just because we have it good?
Because if it comes at the cost of bombing children in the Middle East, it's probably not worth it.
My argument is that even if the state of Israel didn't exist,
I'm using that broadly I'm using that emotionally.
Sure. What I'm saying is
interventionism in the Middle East in general, like in Libya.
What I'm saying is that, like, in my opinion, pacifism doesn't exist. Okay, I would
agree. I think
the nature of geopolitics is power abhors a vacuum. And so it's not a question of whether or not there's going to be fights over the world's energy supply. The question is who is fighting it, who is controlling it, and how. And I would argue the history of the 20th century, you can point to many of our sins. I would think that our sins are terrible, but oftentimes not as bad as our rivals and competitors.
Agreed, yeah. Look, this is an analogy that you and your audience will appreciate greatly. I view the United States like the imperium of man.
Yes.
Are they better than chaos?
Yes.
By a lot. Are they the good guys? No.
I do
1,000
too.
souls a day.
But at the same time, like, I don't think there is such a thing as good when it comes to like there.
True.
There's
fine.
better, but there's not pure ideological good.
100% agree. I mean, yeah. Well, that's a separate religious question. But yes, sure, I agree. And states are obviously going to have blood on its hands no matter what. But it's better to minimize all of that.
So let me ask this then. Do you think that, like, liberalism, maximum freedom from government, and republicanism, representative democracy, do you think that those are local goods? Like, they're only good for, like, Europeans and nations that are spawned out of European political births? Or do you think that local goods versus universal goods, where realistically these are ideas that are probably just good for the species?
Where's my option for I think they're both awful and I'm for fascism and communism and all that?
Yeah, I don't have that.
I think that I think that democracy doesn't work if the underlying cultural programming is not conducive to it.
Sure.
I think democracy does spawn out of I think the Enlightenment spawns out of a Christian kind of underpinning generally.
But can you appeal to the individualism that's kind of like inherent within the human experience in order to arrive at natural rights and representative democracy and all that kind of stuff, even in, like, let's say a theocratic context or a communist context, where obviously like China came out of a different cultural context and theocratic authoritarian Islam came out of a different cultural context? Can you still appeal to the individualism inherent in the human experience in order to get those people to see the light of
Yes, I believe in evangelization. Yes, I believe that cultural Christianity should be spread across the world.
And cultural,
so by example,
non-literal?
not by force. Yeah, I mean moderate Christianity, you could call it. I don't know, Christian, like I'm Christian adjacent. I'm a Petersonian Christian.
I had the pleasure of watching a Jordan Peterson debate recently, and the Jubilee one, and he defined lived Christianity without being literalist as voluntary upward self-sacrifice in order to build a better world. He said the kingdom of heaven on earth.
Yes,
and then that one of the fundamental beliefs of like lived Christianity is that the cosmos itself is rooted in that concept, that voluntary self-sacrifice makes the world a better place. Correct. And that seems to be imbued into reality.
Correct.
And so is that the part of cultural Christianity that you think is most worth spreading?
Probably.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
I mean, we agree.
We agree.
Beef Supreme says, is it better to have friends who are just our friends for money? I feel like America only has allies because we give them money. I'll tell you, it's better than having no fucking friends, and it's better than having enemies who want your fucking money. Getting into that. So the reason why I bring these things up, I'm kind of like prodding your brain to see if I can get you to align with me. My argument is that the United States in the 20th and 21st century has effectively evangelized through soft and hard power and programs like USAID and the CIA and military intervention, has effectively tried to spread mixed economy capitalism, liberal democracy, republicanism, and all that kind of stuff. And while there's certainly some bad things, like for instance, we sold Saddam Hussein VX gas that he then used to gas Iranian child soldiers in eastern Iraq during the Iran-Iraq war. I think that's beyond fucked up, and I hope the CIA agents who helped him target Iranian soldiers, I hope they stay up at night thinking about the fact that they killed teenagers in the most horrific ways possible. However, I think that the geopolitical reality... Are you still with me, or did I lose you?
No.
Oh, you just have a very stoic face.
Deeply
in thought.
But I would argue stare.
I would just argue that if you look at Islamic theocracy, or if you look at communism, mixed economy capitalism, and liberal democracy and republicanism are infinitely better. And so I can criticize the project. I still identify with the ideals. So what do you say to that?
I would identify with the ideals as well.
Okay, but do you think the project has gone too far to the point that
the project has done the opposite of that? I think liberalism is now ever more in decline and in decay and viewed as a mistake.
Are you sure you're not spending too much time on the internet?
No, I definitely am spending too much time on the internet.
But do you think that that is fueling your perception that fascism or authoritarian communism are on the verge of snuffing out liberalism?
I wouldn't say that, but I think it's, the American perception in the world, and you can argue, do we even care about this, is rapidly on the decline. Is that disputed?
That's not disputed, but I would actually say that's because we're withdrawing from our values. So I would actually say Trump engaging in the tariffs and economic protectionism and fucking over our allies as well,
part of it,
as well as our enemies. I would say that abandoning Ukraine, which I know you don't want to comment on specifically, but I would say that a lot of Europeans resent us for abandoning Ukraine.
Here's what I'll say. I share the perspectives of John Mearsheimer on Ukraine. So
that's probably bad, but I don't know enough about Mearsheimer in order to...
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like I've heard Mearsheimer. I've heard people cite Mearsheimer in their debates or whatever, but effectively all the libs and progressives, they basically like their nose like curls, whenever
Yeah.
they hear the name.
It's because he's Jewish and they're all anti-Semitic. So just kidding. I don't even think he's Jewish.
But
He could be.
okay, and then I would also view effectively helping Israel, which, by the way, I think that the Kamala administration, while it still would have supported Israel, I don't think that they would have ever suggested deporting 1 million Gazans to Libya in order to help ethnically cleanse Gaza. I don't think they would have ever suggested. Now, I'm happy Trump didn't actually end up executing it, but they would have never thought about suggesting to Bibi Netanyahu in a press conference that we were going to help him ethnically cleanse Gaza so we could build resorts on the new Riviera.
Right.
So for me, like Trump is, we don't even have to get to cutting like AIDS and mosquito prevention in Africa. I think just those things alone make Trump like a moral horror.
I think Trump is a degenerate scum.
Okay.
I find zero evidence whatsoever that Kamala would have done absolutely anything to curb Netanyahu's and the Israeli government's actions.
Yeah, she
Go
just
look at
probably
any
wouldn't
of
have
her
publicly
rhetoric.
endorsed it.
Then okay, I don't care. That's the least consequential part of the issue.
I don't think so at all, because I think in publicly endorsing it effectively emboldens Israel to do even
I
worse.
could make the case it would be worse, because her condemning it while saying, yeah, we're still going to allow you to do that, makes it seem like we're doing something about it when in fact we're not. At least when they're endorsing it, we know we can see the monster for what it is. Kamala would go, it's the meme of we're going to drop bombs on you, but we'll put rainbow flags on. I'm like, don't worry, we're doing it for liberal tolerance. Like, that's what Kamala would have been. And there's zero evidence whatsoever. If you listen to any interview she did where she talked about Iran, what's the greatest threat? She didn't say China. She didn't say North Korea. She didn't say whatever. She said Iran, greatest threat to America. What would you have done about Netanyahu? I think they cut the interview or they edited it or whatever. She said nothing at all condemning Netanyahu whatsoever. And so this idea that she provided any evidence that she would have done anything to curb Netanyahu, to not provide the bunker busters, any of that, I don't believe it.
Well,
at least Trump, because in his narcissistic egomania, there was the probability that he would have turned on Bibi because he hates Bibi for personal reasons, and that actually would have done something. And there was evidence. There were reports about that shit. Of course, it goes back and forth.
There were reports that what was it that like Israel says that they consulted with us, but there's like before they did their preliminary bombing campaign, and there was I saw this article that said that Trump actually was watching Fox News and became jealous of Fox News cheering on the Israeli bombing, and he's like, how do I get this kind of coverage? And so the military industrial complex was like, ooh, GBU 57 bunker busters on 3 nuclear sites will get you that kind of coverage, sir. And then they launched the air campaign. Now, of course, that could be like a wine mom liberal fever dream. I have no idea, but it sounds possible.
Yeah.
So hold on. So let's talk about that though. So you actually view the Iranian bombing campaign as it sounds like almost like purely negative. Do you not even see it in like a pragmatic stance?
Well, I don't know at this point. Apparently, we can just drop bombs on 4 nations and they don't care anymore. So maybe I overestimated how much of a problem it is to drop bombs on them.
Well, I mean, we've been doing it for 2 decades through the war on terror.
Yeah.
I don't know what authorization
of
use of military force authorizes the Iran air campaign. There might not even be one. But I know that there's like emergency powers for the president that effectively they can act and then go to Congress afterwards. But for a formal declaration of war, you need Congress. And for a perpetual operation, you need Congress. But for emergency situations, I actually don't think you need Congress.
That's fine. Well, I don't really... My general principle is Iran... The reason Iran hates America, it's a variety of reasons, but it's mainly because we support Israel. We don't just support them, we suck everything they do. And we suck all their genitals. And if we stopped doing that, they wouldn't hate us as much. And the idea is, well, we have to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. I'm sympathetic to that. Like, all things considered, would it be worse if Iran had a nuclear weapon? Probably. I could very easily see the scenario, well, North Korea has nuclear weapons. They're run by someone who's arguably more insane than the Iranians. The Iranians have at least demonstrated self-preservation. So this idea that as soon as Iran would get a nuke, they would nuke Israel, it's like, well, all of their behavior indicates they're cowardly self-preservationists. So, what do we
Well,
say? Are we going off
yeah.
their rhetoric? Because Kim Jong-un says crazier shit. Russia also has nuclear weapons, and we're essentially engaged in a hot war with them. So what's this all
and they
fucking
don't-
hand-wringing?
and they do. I think that with nukes, the reason why is it because it precludes an invasion, right? Because in a regime that is threatened to be deposed and murdered anyways by revolutionaries / an American invasion, why not go out with a bang, right? That's one of the ideas. Then the other idea is not so much that the Iranian government specifically would authorize a nuclear strike against Israel. It would be more like there's a jihadist rationale that effectively, like, there's scriptural passages in the Quran that say if you die fighting in holy war, then you're pretty much guaranteed a slot in heaven. This is like the passages that justify suicide bombing.
Right.
So
those
it's
passages
not that
are... Go ahead.
Oh, all I was going to say is it wouldn't be the Iranian government writ large. It would be one batshit schizo cleric who gives one batshit schizo suicide bomber a tactical nuke that then irradiates Tel Aviv or New York City. Now, the chances of that happening, incredibly rare, or incredibly low. But are you willing to bet hundreds of thousands of lives on that possibility? It just won't happen.
What do you ask? Well, I don't even know what you're asking.
Well, I mean, this is effectively the current American calculus is, are you willing to bet hundreds of thousands of lives on the fact that the Iranians are self-preservationists and that a specifically schizo Iranian won't do something crazy with a nuke?
I have to, because I already do that with North Korea and Russia.
But I'm saying that there's like a psychological, ideological difference where Russia and Korea, I know they're not communist anymore, Russia isn't specifically, but they tend to be like materialists. There are people who are interested in this plane of existence.
What's North Korea?
What's that?
North Korea is as insane as the Iranian regime. Are you kidding?
Sure.
Okay, so all of this already applies to North Korea. So why are we not bombing North Korea right now?
Well, I think we would if we could.
We would if we could. We could do it right now. We have Japan and South Korea are filled with U.S. military bases.
Well, and I think what we're effectively waiting for is like an internal coup, and then for the disarray to capitalize on the disarray to seize North Korea. We're waiting for somebody to kill Kim Jong-un, or is it Kim Jong-un? Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un? I think it's Kim Jong-un at this point. Yeah, Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong-il was his dad.
Right. So we're waiting for Kim Jong-un to say, okay, I'm tired. That's enough. Let's go ahead and normalize relations.
Okay, but are you willing to bet millions of lives in the meantime that he could nuke someone before that happens?
Well, I think for the Koreans, the answer is they have to, right? Because
South Koreans don't, and Japan don't. They could invade, and the U.S. could help them.
Well, right. But then that's another risk, which is effectively, if Kim Jong-un's going down, could he just burn Seoul out of spite?
Sure.
Or burn Tokyo out of spite?
Okay, all right. Let's apply this to Israel. You don't think Israel has the exact same incentive? They have nuclear weapons, and they don't abide by any of the non-proliferation treaties.
And?
That's insane.
They're relatively speaking rational actors.
Oh, really? What happens when the Messianic Jews who try to usher in the Third Temple, which is the fastest growing demographic in Israel, according to Benny Morris, the far-right religious nutjobs, supported by the Christian Zionists, who also want to usher in the end times? What happens when they get one of their religious clerics, like Ben Gvir, get in charge?
I don't know.
Okay.
I genuinely don't know.
Do we nuke them? Should we strike Israel? Well, it's like, no. It's not our fucking problem.
So I would hope that
sorry, I want to acknowledge. Hold on, real quick. I want to acknowledge that because I am terminally online, and I have nothing going for me in my real life. I say meta ironically. I shouldn't necessarily be getting this mad.
No, it's okay.
So
I don't care.
I'm not actually mad. But I'm getting hyped up mainly because
this is an appeal to hypocrisy that I hear Tucker Carlson and people like him do all the time. So it's a talking point worth addressing.
Which one?
That the Western world seems to use a lot of propaganda in order to imply that the Iranian regime is not a rational actor.
Correct.
And yet, by default, we auto-trust the Israeli regime and we tolerate the Russian and North Korean regimes as a matter of status quo.
Yes. Now, as someone who is, again, not an expert of any kind, That makes sense to me. I'm curious as to where you think that's wrong. How is Iran a less rational actor than North Korea?
I think that it's entirely possible that North Korea, because for instance, like North Korea just comes out and they say, eventually we'll retake the South and America is the great Satan. And if you try to fuck with us, we'll burn the entire peninsula. And they say all that crazy shit all the time.
Which they do.
It's
I'm pretty sure they've declared war on
possible.
America internally like 7 times in the last like 20 years or something.
Yeah, and not just that. North Koreans who have escaped into the South have effectively said that they are raised since birth to believe that Americans during the Korean War, which by the way, we did commit some horrific war crimes, but it was all by air. We just bombed the shit out of their country and we didn't care if we killed civilians.
Yeah.
But they were told that Americans are effectively like cannibalistic rapists. And if America ever invades, we'll just like rape and kill them all for fun because we like to do that. And so that's what they're raised with since birth. And so the population is effectively radicalized to never tolerate an invasion, because tolerating an invasion doesn't just mean the destruction of the state. It actually means your entire family is going to get raped and eaten. So actually, in a lot of ways, North Korea could be just as crazy as Iran, or even crazier in some regards.
Right, and they currently have nukes.
Well, then the question is, if we agreed descriptively that North Korea is...
I am just a shill, by the way. I'm just a shill. Qatar pays me. I make all my money from Qatar.
I don't think so. We would both be richer because he would be hooking me up with his connection. So, the point is that within this dynamic, though, we're talking about pre-nuclear Korea, right? Pre-nuclear North Korea.
Okay.
And so the question is, if you have the ability to prevent a nuclear Korea, do you? And so the answer for a lot of Americans is yes. At what cost? Well, and that's a great question. And then the other question is, if we just let them do it, then Saudi basically said, we will nuclearize if Iran has the bomb. And then you have a 3-way Mexican standoff between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, which, by the way, that could be a new stability, mutually assured destruction between these three.
That was sort of the guiding principle for the last 60 years, and it worked, or last 80 years.
But it is scary as fuck.
I agree. I think the best option is everyone denuclearizes, including Israel.
Well, that's obviously not going to happen.
I know, because, well, why is it obviously not going to happen, Connor?
Oh, the same reason why I wouldn't want to denuclearize.
Three letters.
What?
ZOG.
Oh, come on. But I wouldn't want to nuclearize.
You wouldn't want
Israel? Denuclearize. I wouldn't want to, and I'm an American, and I don't give a shit about Israel.
You wouldn't want Israel to denuclearize? You wouldn't want America to denuclearize? America should not denuclearize. We're God's true chosen people.
Okay, fair.
Israel.
I didn't realize this was American patriot denuclearization, where America keeps the weapons.
Yes, of course.
Everybody else denuclearizes.
I'm saying Israel, if it wants to make peace with Iran, which it doesn't, that's the issue. It's a terrorist regime at this point. There are many Israelis who are good, and I'm on the side of, and I wish they January 6th the Knesset. I'd be on their side. And the Israelis, they all have military service. So if they did January 6th, they'd actually be able to fucking overthrow Bibi and tie him up and give him over to Hamas. I think we should give Bibi to Iran in exchange for Iran denuclearizing. What do we think?
I'm okay with it on principle. I don't think it'll work in practice. And I do want to read this chat because I think it's funny, because I want to address it, and I'm sure you'll want to address it too. What was I thinking? And by the way, quick shell time, guys. It's late in the afternoon, and it's later than we normally stream, but we still have like 60 to 70 people in chat, which is dope. Like the stream. Liking the stream is free. Engage in chat. Lots of funny, interesting, and cool people in there. Comment for the comment gods on the VODs, and then also super chats and memberships if you got them. Never required, always appreciated. So, ideally, Israel denuclearizing and giving up nuke weapons, but keeping a civilian program, I don't think is possible right now. We can talk about Zog momentarily. And then I think it would be possible a century from now. But the Abraham Accords and the normalization of relations between Israel, Turkey, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, This is all within the past 90% of it is all within the past 10 years. Some of it is within the past 50. And so I think there would be like another century of stabilization where Israel doesn't think that it's going to have a four-way war similar to like the 67 and 73 wars. I think that they would need to feel comfortable that their Arab neighbors are good enough friends that they're not going to be reinvaded before they denuclearize.
Okay, good for them.
Okay.
They have the largest conventional military, the most effective one. Also, what are nukes going to do against Hamas?
It's not going to do anything against Hamas, but if there was like it's implied in the 1970s that was Ben Gvir. No, not Ben Gvir. It was the girl, Golden
or whatever.
Golden Meir.
Golden Meir, yeah, something like that.
Something like that. So it was implied in a recent dissident right-wing stream that I watched that Golden Meir, basically, this was like the 70s, and they were actually getting their shit kicked in. And Israel called the United States and says, either you resupply us or we're going to do something desperate in order to protect ourselves. And the implication of that was, since they have nukes, that they would effectively like nuke invading Egyptian and Jordanian and Syrian forces. So I think that's what nukes would be used for, is effectively like tactical nukes to wipe out a few 100,000 invading soldiers. And if civilians die, it is what it is.
Okay, so you've just described exactly why Iran wants nukes and why Libya foolishly gave up their nukes and then ended up getting...
Sure, but we're in a competing... We're competing for the soul, similar to the Imperium of Man and Chaos. We are competing for the souls of the planet. And there's currently 3 or 4 ideologies that are competing for the souls of the planet. I would say fascism is one of them. Authoritarian communism is one of them. I would say theocratic Islam is one of them. And I would say mixed economy capitalism / liberal democratic republics. That's the last one. So liberal democracy for short. I want liberal democracy to win. So when you say Iran has a natural self-interest for why they want the nuke, that doesn't change the fact that I want Iran, the theocratic authoritarian regime, to lose and to fall. So you can say it's rationally self-interested,
sure,
but they're not on my team.
And to be clear, and look, I do like you said at the very beginning, I came out saying we need a cohesive culture. I'm very aware of how little managing my perception I do. In fact, doing the opposite and probably doing a piss poor job of communicating. So I should be very clear. The Iranian regime is a degenerate scum regime that executes fucking gay people and murders children and all that fucking shit. They are disgusting and degenerate.
So you don't resent me trying to play geopolitics against their interest.
But and geopolitics is like perhaps the most stripped of morality type game you can play.
Oh yeah, it's like but I think that's why it's compellingly interesting, is because you're effectively playing chess with hundreds of thousands of people's lives at stake.
Yes, but this is why I bring up the North Korea example, is because everything I would say about Iran, I would say about North Korea, and they have nukes. And they have nukes. North Korea is closer to South Korea and Japan than Iran is to Israel.
Yeah.
So in some sense, like everything that's bad about Iran, North Korea is worse. Now Iran is funding proxies, fine. This just comes down to I do not value. So for example, if you have to kill a bunch of Iranians to save 100,000 Israelis, to kill 1 million Iranians to save 100,000 Israelis, that's not a trade I'm willing to accept. Israeli lives are not more valuable than Iranian lives. So, American lives are more valuable than all of their lives, but that's because I'm a fucking American. I mean that tongue in cheek, in some sense, because obviously I prioritize my own national interests, but I also don't want to kill innocent people.
So there's actually a geopolitical question about Israel's natural interest, because you kind of appeal to Iran's natural interest. But I want to address this point because I actually think that I disagree with it. And I'll let you expand upon it as well. Mark says, I prioritize freedom of expression, but fuck you for waving a flag, Jung. This is one of my frustrations with liberals and progressives, particularly the ones in my chat who think I'm just like them. Just because you have the right to express yourself as an American citizen doesn't mean that I don't have the ability to criticize the way in which you choose to express yourself.
I don't even know what this comment means. What is he saying?
This was in reference to you criticizing immigrants and second-generation immigrants rioting and waving Mexican flags and saying that they're not American.
Correct. Yes. Fuck them. Yes, that's ridiculous. Wave an American flag, as they did in the past. There's literally like old immigration protests where they all had white shirts in America. It's like, oh, we're American too. This is just proving you're not an American.
Well, and what I would say is that, like, if there were Irish immigrants that were first or second generation and they were flying Irish flags to protest the American government,
right,
and they were saying, fuck you, go ahead and send me back to Ireland,
the amount
you
of
pieces
Irish
of shit,
slurs I would
Ireland
saying.
first, then I'd be like, yeah, fuck you, and deport them too.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Amen.
so especially if they're non-citizens. If they're citizens, they have the freedom of speech to say that, but I can still criticize them saying it because I think it's counterproductive and not for social cohesion. So,
yeah. Oh, dude, I hope the fucking Irish start waving their flags. I'll fucking start cussing.
Beef Supreme says the U.S. basically becomes a World Bank, and now China is taking the role from us. So when we are no longer paying and China is, what happens then? Well, I mean, that's actually my argument. That's why I want Trump to not give up our role as international hegemon, because it comes with a lot of responsibility, but it also comes with a lot of benefits. But moving back into our conversation, so we're not just addressing chat. I will address chat at the end of our conversation. Zog. That's where we were at. So I was going to ask the question. Yeah. Israel was established effectively, like in the 19th century, Jews started moving back to Palestine, right? And they started colonizing it, settling it, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, that's one way.
Then in the early 20th century, there was the British Mandate.
Yep.
And effectively, the Brits promised a two-state solution, which was going to be half Palestinian, half Israeli.
Yes.
During the 48 Declaration of Independence, the Israelis and the Palestinians were both preparing for conflict in this territory. Mm-hmm. Israel did the Nakba, which is obviously fucked up. It's just ethnic cleansing. And then there was like the reverse Nakba, which is all the Jews got expelled from the Middle East and North Africa, and a lot of them resettled in the state of Israel. In the 20th century, they fought 3 major wars in order to establish their state. And Iran, maybe not recently, but in recent decades, has said that one of their priorities is the dismantling of the state of Israel, and that they would ultimately, if they needed to, pursue a nuclear weapon in order to achieve the dismantling of the state of Israel. Mm-hmm. So, number one, do you begrudge Israel like assassinating nuclear scientists and doing the Stuxnet cyber virus and all that kind of shit? And then number two, what do you, because it sounds like you resent it, what do you resent about them engaging in realpolitik in order to leverage the United States into their corner?
Meaning, what do I dislike about Israel leveraging its whatever influence it can over the United States to benefit itself?
Yep.
I respect it, but I'm not an Israeli, so why would I want my interest to be subordinated to a foreign country?
Because I think a lot of people who do it would say that the United States interest is not subordinated, it's parallel.
Yeah, well, yes, okay. That's wrong.
Why?
Because even just in principle, there are obviously situations where U.S. and Israeli interests can diverge. Like, for example, getting sucked into a war in Iran. That would not be good. If U.S. boots on the ground were in Iran, that would be ridiculous. That would not be good for us.
Sure. But I think we've told them that we are not interested in, I think we've told them in the past, month or two, we're not interested in a regime change war. We're barely interested in a limited bombing campaign.
Okay, it depends on who you mean by we. Ted Cruz has explicitly stated he's looking for a regime change. That's one example.
Bibi or who else?
Ted Cruz.
Lindsey Graham, I know.
Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham. There's plenty of neocons who say explicitly we're looking for regime change. Bibi has said explicitly we're looking for regime change.
Sure. But what Ted Cruz said in his Tucker interview, which I watched as well, is that he does not want American boots on the ground. He wants pro-democratic forces in the state of Iran in order to overthrow
6 months
the
ago,
Ayatollahs.
Americans will not be striking Iran. We'll be defending Israel in the event that Iran thinks. 6 months later, 30,000-pound bunker buster. It's the old slippery slope. Well, we're not going to get involved at all. Okay, well, if Israel gets attacked, obviously we'll defend them, but we're not going to put boots on the ground. Okay, well, obviously we're going to move more forces around. We're not going to strike Iran directly. and then bunker buster in the ground.
Okay. So, effectively,
I'm not saying
you
it's
don't.
guaranteed, but there's plenty of evidence of bullshit and hypocrisy that makes me go,
Okay.
I don't trust you.
So you don't trust neocons when they say no boots on the ground. You just don't trust them.
Yes, I think they have a bad track record of being
Well, and I can't even necessarily argue against you in that regard because we're coming off of 20 years, 10,000 dead, 250,000 people deployed at a time, $2 or $3 trillion budget, war on terror. So I could argue against the pragmatics of why deposing the Iranian regime through boots on the ground isn't worth it or even militarily practicable.
Yeah.
But I would also see your aversion to it where you're like, I don't even want to fuck with it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, frankly, part of the reason why I don't think it'll happen is because I think the American people would legitimately rebel because we're coming off of 20 years of war in the Middle East and North Africa.
Right. That's why I'm out here. I'm out here trying to stir the pot. I'm trying to put my memes out there that when the time comes, the memes will activate. And then they'll
but
turn on
let me
States.
ask, if let's say that there are no boots on the ground and 6 CIA operatives go into Iran and they're carrying briefcases of a few $1 million, and they give this to pro-democratic revolutionaries who have sympathizers in the military who are willing to overthrow the Shah, or not the Shah, excuse me, the Ayatollahs. Would you give a shit?
Would I give a shit? My general view is let's stop interfering so much in other people's affairs. Now, your point is we're a global economy. There's nuclear threats. We're intertwined. We need to exert influence.
And not just that, but mixed economy capitalism and liberal democracy and representative republics are universal human goods. So these are things that we should push for in the long term, both through soft power and hard power.
You know what? I used to think that. My thinking has evolved in the last year in particular of like, maybe it actually is good that there are, or not good, but maybe the default state of things is not to have the global, like if there are women who are strict enforcers of burqas and niqabs, I think it is the complete
sure
face mask thing or whatever. Is that bad for them? Yeah, maybe. I think so in some deep religious sense, but that does not mean we have any obligation to change their societies so that they don't do that anymore.
Well, I agree to a part. So, for instance, like I think that degenerate liberty is the mirror of like degenerate dogmatism.
Very radically enlightened centrist of you. I appreciate you saying that.
And so like when who is it? Some artist, some pop artist, it was on Pierce Morgan. Their album cover is effectively like their vagina in a raincoat.
Yeah, Lord.
Yeah. And then
Sabrina Carpenter's like on her knees, like looking like she's gonna suck someone's dick.
Which, by the way, I'm more amenable to.
I suppose I'm more amenable to that one, I guess, but it's just like, dude, it's just fucking degeneracy, bro.
My wife is a big Sabrina Carpenter fan. So
that's fair. I mean, I've listened to her songs and not been like, this sucks. But
yeah.
I would not want my daughter.
No. I would never want my children
banged
to be involved ever in this kind of music.
Which is mostly for her audience, which is part of the problem. But
sure. So if that's an example of degenerate liberty, in my opinion, going too far.
Yeah.
And then if there's the example of not degenerate, but like
the opposite,
brittle,
authoritarian
ossified religiosity.
Yes, totalitarianism. Yes.
Yeah, then I would view that expressed in state-mandated burqa and niqab or whatever you said the face veil is.
Yeah.
So I would view those as opposite extremes. And so I would be more for like a soft power kind of thing where it's like we just try to, I don't know, be Iran's friends and maybe have a couple of CIA agents sneak some pro-democracy forces a few $1 million so they can do protests and instigate protesting against the government and maybe create a social media app like whatever we did in Cuba, where we try to create Cuban Facebook so they can have secured communication.
We should also give them
totalitarian regime.
let's give them $100 million for DEI training
Yeah.
at their corporate workplace.
No,
right?
unironically. Yeah, like I know not DEI
No, I mean that
specifically, but
ironically.
unironically, I believe in the spread of soft power.
Transgender dance festivals in Bangladesh.
Sure, whatever. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, it's too much interfering, and I just
well,
think
but my
people hate us
frustration
for
with
it.
this, my frustration with your perspective, and by the way, you can be just as frustrated with mine because my perspective has probably cost a lot of human lives. But I feel like it's ultimately the moral thing to do because conflict, who controls the globe matters. And so when it comes to like Shoe on Head read the things that were cut from the USAID program, and she read the most belligerent descriptions of the programs possible.
Correct.
And one of them was like spreading atheism in Nepal.
Yes.
Well, when you actually look at the description of the program, it's that atheism is prohibited in Nepalese society.
Sure.
And so they were like giving money in order to support atheist and agnostic and pluralistic religious societies and organizations within Nepal in order to protest the government to allow freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. So it wasn't like, let's turn all the kids into demonic Satanists. It was, well, we think that people should actually have freedom of speech and freedom of conscience.
Yeah. And like the transgender dance festival in Bangladesh was the LGBTQ community in Bangladesh was more left-wing, and the U.S. wanted to depose the right-wing government. So we helped energize the left-wing movement to depose the right-wing government. That's why we funded transgender dance festivals in Bangladesh. It's not to spread transgenderism. It's to depose a foreign government so that, for example, a more sympathetic government could take over, and then we could approve making a military base there. It's very cynical.
Sure.
Yeah, and I just think
it's too much.
I just think that level of manipulation, backfires. We're not smart enough to be able to manage to calculate all of the costs and risks associated with this. Right? Sure. This is just a thing I put together. I feel like the CIA is doing what socialists want to do with the economy. Let's just freeze rent. We'll do the thing that makes sense on paper. Yeah, you can't calculate all the negative consequences of what you're going to do, and it's going to ripple through the things. And I think that's what happened with the CIA.
Well, okay, so I'm going to wrap this up just because I feel like we've identified where we disagree.
Yeah.
And then I want to move into Zog, and I think that I typically try to let these things run for like 60 to 90 minutes, so I want to hit Zog before we wrap up.
Yeah, that's fair. I can go for
another what I was going to say is, though, so we know basically that like I'm more neocon, you're more populist con, I guess, in reference to these specific topics, I suppose. And when it comes to these things, when you look at these things in a vacuum, this is what frustrated me about the Shoe on Head stuff, is that if you look at them in a vacuum, you can be like, well, who are we to tell Nepal what to do with their civic culture? And same thing with whatever, Bangladeshi transgender fucking dance parties. So the thing is that if you look at the world is not a vacuum. There are pro-Russian intel and soft power operations. There are Chinese soft power operations. There are Islamist soft power operations. And so we are not operating in a vacuum in order to forward America's power. Our rivals are also forwarding their soft power as well. And so that's the thing. It's like, the Belt and Road Initiative is often brought up in the Chinese context. The Belt and Road Initiative is an example of the Chinese competing with us with reference to soft power.
Correct.
Okay. Nice!
I think I saw you
Barricane Brothers
like 2 years ago. And there was like a month period of time.
Yeah.
And I would wake up literally every day with like this massive pain over here.
Yeah.
And this thing got rid of it after like 2 weeks.
Hell yeah. Barricane Brothers. For those of you who can't see because my camera is dark, I've been stabbing myself in a knot in my shoulder for the past like 20 or 30 minutes. And PF Jung just busted out his Barricane and started stabbing his knots. Very based. Very based.
Nobody likes stabbing knots more than I do.
All right. Zog.
Cool it with the anti-Semitism, bro.
So I was gonna you should make that a soundbite for your streams, by the way. The fucking Christian Bale.
Yeah,
cool it with the anti-Semitism.
I should.
That should be a $5 super chat.
I should have that on.
Whoa,
you know what? Because
Decadence.
then people would actually think I'm a white supremacist, and with valid reasons.
Well,
At
yeah,
that point, that's something Nick Fuentes would do.
it would be
Cool
funny
it with the anti-Semitism, bro. Oh yeah, I should do that though.
So in reference to this though, you kind of conceded that you don't necessarily begrudge Israel advocating in its national interest, but you do begrudge them co-opting the United States to be subordinate to their national interest.
Yeah. If I were Israeli, well, it depends. I suppose which Israeli am I? Am I a gay liberal Israeli or am I a Orthodox Jew Israeli? Because in that case, it's different.
Well, wouldn't you want the liberal American empire to back you if you were a gay Israeli, and if you were a hardcore Orthodox Israeli, wouldn't you want them to back your settlements in the West Bank?
Correct. So this is my point. I wouldn't say begrudge. It is entirely within rational calculus that Israel zogs the fuck out the U.S. government. They zog us. Okay, you know how the kids mog on each other.
Yeah.
Israel zogs on each other or on us, and I don't blame them. I would too if I was Israel. If I was Iran, I would try to develop nuclear weapons and wipe Israel off the map because I'm a jihadist Muslim apparently. So I can put myself in the shoes of anyone. That doesn't mean I, as an American, agree with it.
Okay, and so if let's design your Middle Eastern and North African policy real quick. So with me, I'm actually relatively okay with the status quo of hybridized soft and hard power. Israel's an ally. We're trying to stabilize with Egypt. We're trying to stabilize with Saudi Arabia, stabilize with Jordan, stabilize with Syria, have a new anti-Assad regime imposed in Syria that seems to be wanting to like normalize with the Western world and develop trade and all that kind of stuff. I actually like what's happening in the past 5 years in the Middle East and North Africa. So I guess my question is, I think that a limited bombing campaign against Iran and then kind of supporting democratic reforms / democratic forces in the Iranian regime, I think that's perfectly acceptable. So what is your foreign policy in the Middle East and North Africa, bearing in mind that 2/3 of the world's energy supply is in the Middle East and North Africa?
Isn't the U.S. a net exporter of energy?
It is, but that doesn't mean that what happens in the Middle East and North Africa doesn't matter.
But it certainly means it matters less to me as an American.
Well, the reason why I think this is myopic is that somebody in chat pointed this out earlier. I don't know if it's true.
Yep.
They said that if we ramped up to full production, we effectively would have like 5 to 6 years of proven oil reserves, and we are just praying that we are finding more. Whereas if you look at like Canada has like 80 years of oil reserves. And if you look at the Middle East and North Africa, we could run it for centuries.
We just invade Canada. Hold on.
I know that's a meme answer, but doesn't that cause like more hardship?
Okay, we would not invade Canada. We would buy their, we do import a lot of oil sands from Canada. We frack a lot here. How much energy reserves does the United States have, assuming full extraction rates? This is according to ChatGPT. Let's find the sources here. Cite your sources.
I don't need the sources. I'll just trust ChatGPT.
Well, we have enough coal for 200 to 300 years of consumption rates.
Okay.
Current consumption rate, but coal's not very good. Natural gas, we have about 90 to 100. This is as of recent estimates, 2023 data. Recoverable assets, here we go. Crude oil, natural gas, preserved. U.S. oil, this is fucking ad blocker. This is less about the point itself. This is more the practice of I need to actually look up facts more because I'm too much of a vibes guy apparently.
Sure.
These are reserves.
Dude, just give it to me. I don't care if it's accurate.
No, I don't know. No, it's I don't care if it's accurate. I don't believe that claim. I am no longer. I'm not the person saying that. I cast doubt on that. The null hypothesis is I don't know, but I believe my understanding is that we've got ridiculous amounts of energy reserves in oil sands and all that.
Okay.
But regardless,
Well, I mean,
regardless.
I pray you're correct. So you think that we can be energy independent?
But that aside, that's that aside.
The oil market should still be stabilized.
Sure, but maybe it would be stabilized if, maybe had Iran socialized its oil and created a prosperous society, the Ayatollahs wouldn't have fucking taken over.
Yeah, and maybe they would have backed the Soviet Union and backed China harder than they already do, and we would still be dealing with communist empires.
Maybe, but if your belief, which I know you and I share, is that socialism and communism are by definition bad and self-destructive, it would have collapsed eventually anyway.
Yeah, but eventually that doesn't mean it still couldn't have won the Cold War. So just as an example, now, this is where I almost feel like normalizing relations with China might have been a geopolitical necessity, but it might have been a mistake in some ways. Mm-hmm. Because what technology has done is it's enabled the Chinese state, because I don't know, 50 years ago, 70 years ago or whatever, the mass surveillance required in order to keep like an authoritarian population down was relatively speaking difficult. You had to have spies, you had to be willing to execute people,
now we got artificial intelligence,
secret police and all that kind of stuff. And now you have the internet, artificial intelligence, you have keyboard monitoring, you have the dark web versus the light web, you have all that kind of stuff. And so effectively, the dystopian authoritarian police state that is currently enshrined in the CCP is not weaker through technology, it's stronger through technology.
Correct.
And then not just that, it's hybridization of the authoritarianism of communist ideology mixed with the market successes of state capitalism. It doesn't just make them powerful from a dystopian police state style, it also makes them economically wealthy.
Correct.
So if they're wealthy and they have a powerful police state, and if the police state is being enabled by even stronger technologies over incoming centuries, from where is the collapse going to come? Some kind of ideological contradiction? Like we live in the West, in the free societies, we live with ideological contradictions all the time. It's part of our consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What, you just have faith?
Are you asking me? I agree with everything you're saying.
I know, but that's what I'm saying is if the Soviet Union had survived until the 1990s and was bolstered by the petroleum reserves from Iran, we could be dealing with a Soviet-style communist empire that was state capitalist and just as nefarious as the modern CCP. And I would view that as incredibly worse than the war on terror.
Hypothetically, we could. You could just as easily make the case that it would have collapsed anyway post-Chernobyl and the continued corruption and the lies that underpin the entire Soviet Union and like repression of individual rights and all that. It's like, hypothetically.
Okay. Well, I think what's really going on is that you do not, as somebody who values freedom of conscience, self-expression, all that kind of stuff, you don't like volunteering other people to be killed for your comfort. So it's an
incredibly charitable way to put my position.
No, I mean, I think it's a through line as far as I can see with your previous arguments about Ukraine. Not that I'm going to bring them up specifically, and your current arguments about the Middle East and North Africa.
Yeah.
Is that it's relatively easy for people who live in the decadent West to volunteer other people to die in the name of their comfort. So
true. Yeah. A, yes.
Yeah.
B, that's what. Look, you asked about.
That's kind of what I'm doing.
You asked about.
I'm saying America-based, decadent, Western liberalism-based, but that requires death.
Right, and I'm saying
we should minimize death. As maximally as possible,
and minimize decadence too. Like Klarna coming out with new innovative ways to go into debt to pay for a burrito, as I said earlier. It would be better if that didn't exist.
Well, I think the market might have just kicked them in the dick recently because I think a whole bunch of people took out the Klarna burrito loans and then surprise, surprise, they didn't pay them back. Yeah.
I hope fucking so, bro. Oh my God. It's
yeah. But I would say that's like the reason why I kind of separate that out for like decadence or whatever is I feel like we have like an entire other policy fight particularly on the right, by the way. I know you don't necessarily identify like right wing, quote unquote, but the policy fight on the right
compared to
is that I feel
many
like
people, sure.
what's that?
I am right wing compared to many left wingers.
Yes, but the libertarian my issue is like I'm literally fighting with libertarians on Twitter right now because there was a guy who was like, I paid $30,000 a year for health insurance, and then I was like, how much?
I saw that.
Yeah, I was like, how much
do
do you make a year so I can know whether or not to give a shit?
Right.
And he basically told me to go fuck myself.
Which
But
means
somebody
he makes
did
probably a couple million. I don't know.
well, somebody did the math on it. He makes a minimum of $340,000 a year because if you're self-employed, the maximum the ACA can withdraw is 9% of your income. So he makes a minimum of $340,000.
Yeah.
So I get it. It's annoying for him because he doesn't consume $30,000 worth of services in a year if he's healthy. But then for me, I'm like, I don't give a shit. You want it life, you fucking idiot. Go ride a gold-plated jet ski. Go fucking buy a new plane, you fucking dumbass. You can do whatever the fuck you want.
Agreed.
And so when I deal with libertarians, they think that like they actually do believe that they're economic islands, that the world, the roadways, the airways, the infrastructure, it all just popped up for them to enjoy.
Listen, if we want to turn this into a libertarian hate stream, dude, there's nothing I love more than shitting on the ANCAPs, okay? And libertarians in general.
But that's where it's almost like a domestic policy conversation rather than an international policy conversation, because effectively, at least for me on the right, the social conservatives want a social conservative society, but they think that you should do it yourself. And you should just be like born Christian and moral. And if you're not Christian, you should convert to Christianity, and therefore you would be a more moral person. And then when it comes to fiscal conservatives, they also have like a really individualist lens, which is if you're not rich, then get rich, pussy. You know, that's like their entire mentality. But neither one of them acknowledge that they don't emanate from a vacuum. Like moral people are created through teaching morality.
Yes.
People who are good with money.
This is why I'm sympathetic to Christian nationalism to some degree.
Why? Because they actually say they want to create a culture that pre-exists the moral human beings, and therefore
they want to
they're willing to invest in the population.
Yeah. Now, of course, just like there are there are people who call themselves Christian nationalists who want to throw gays off rooftops and implement blasphemy laws. Those people are my enemy.
Right.
But to the people who are like, no, I think actually we should just be a nation that is more self-consciously Christian in our orientation. Like Christmas is our holiday, not Ramadan, right? We shut off businesses for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's not particularly Christian, but Christmas, right? We teach we have basic foundations in our educational system. It's like a lot of those are Christian ethics. We don't teach Muslim ethics in our Christian or in our education system.
Yeah, that's weirdly enough. Sorry, that's just like an interesting tangent. We specifically teach in the American school system. We oftentimes teach turn the other cheek morality and then going and getting an adult. Whereas effectively, if you look at the Old Testament for Judaism, and if you also look at the Quran, they do have a reciprocal morality. So if somebody hits you, you hit them back.
Correct.
Like that. That is not a presumed the turn the other cheek and go get an adult mentality is something that emanates from Christian morality. It's not presumed in other parts of the world.
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone does not exist in Islam or Judaism.
Right.
So Christianity is, in my opinion, better than those other religions, including Hinduism, which has a caste system, including Islam, including Judaism. It has its flaws, but I'm okay with having a Christian, self-consciously more Christian cultural base and stuff that's more explicit. I think that prayer should be allowed in schools, and not that's not the thing. I'm just throwing random things out that give the overview.
No, I'm good with this. The reason why I try to do this because, I collaborated with Destiny recently, and also I think a lot of liberals and progressives, they like to, I was raised Republican, but I try not to say like stupid things. And so they're like, okay, what does this non-stupid Republican have to say, even if I disagree? And I do try to bully liberals as much as possible that this like vacuous moral ambiguity and like moral relativism is not enough. There are different ideologies with different preferences about how the world works, and there is a good and a bad here, and it needs to be evaluated and enforced. And sometimes it's like I'm talking fucking Latin, I swear to God.
Oh yeah, the cultural relativism is a stain on the left, and the opposite problem, like you said, the totalitarian authoritarianism is a stain on the right. So, I'll just very quickly, just on the topic of Zog, to be very clear.
Yep.
Okay, this is less about foreign policy and just really about deeper issues. Okay.
What, like sovereignty?
No, deeper than that. Okay. Anti-Semitism precedes the fall of many civilizations, right? Like
Okay.
a significant rise, blaming the Jews. Okay, it's a real thing. It's bad, right? It's bad to blame the Jews for one's personal problems and one's personal degeneracy and failings. Okay, and the more that happens, the more likely things degenerate into violence. Pointing out that there are insane Jewish supremacists in Israel, like Ben Gvir, is true, and I believe it's a way of bringing balance to the discourse. Right? There are people who don't know who Ben Gvir is. In my mind, that's the equivalent of not knowing who Anwar Sinwar was, or even knowing what happened on October 7th. Right? Not knowing that the Minister of National Security for Israel. Hold on. Do you know about the Ben Gvir?
Not specifically, but if you told me that there was like a far right-wing faction that actually believes in greater Israel, I wouldn't be surprised.
What if I told you that... Okay, I shouldn't say this.
You can say it.
Dylan Roof?
Yeah.
The mass shooter?
Yep.
Okay, so this was like 2 years ago. I had a shrine to him in my living room.
Why?
Because I think the rights of blacks matter less than the rights of whites.
Are you doing a Ben Gvir LARP right now?
Ben Gvir was the Minister of National Security. Ben Gvir had in his living room a shrine to Baruch Goldstein, who was responsible for the Hebron massacre, the second one, where he walked into a mosque and shot up 29 innocent Palestinian civilians. And he was the Minister of National Security, the guy in charge of West Bank security. And this motherfucker had a shrine to a mass shooter.
Dylan Roof.
Yes. And if I was a Palestinian and I saw kids getting shot in the West Bank and Ben Gvir's the guy in charge of those guards, I would also fucking hate Israel.
Israel's genocidal. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. So until the discourse is balanced by insane people like me saying, hey, I had a shrine to Dylan Roof in my living room to make everyone go, what the fuck? And then point to, that's exactly what the recently former Minister of National Security, still the head of the Jewish Power Party, did. The discourse is imbalanced, and I will continue to say Zog.
No, I'm not going to... There's some people in my chat who want to oppose Zog, but I think that there's
the usage of the term Zog or Zog itself?
Probably the usage of the term Zog.
That's fine.
And so what they, and presumably I, am hostile to is like blatant anti-Semitism, where you actually just think that Jews control the world, they're bad people, they sacrifice children, they poison wells, they do all this fucked up shit. And so as a result, they need to be expelled from American society and disempowered in the government.
They should all come to America. This is God's true chosen country. Zog is the problem with Zog is it's for Israel. I want them zogging for America. Okay, I want Zion National Park to be the Zion I'm advocating for. Okay.
Well, and that's the So I don't think that's what you're saying at all. I think what you're saying is actually a fairly normal, rational, sovereign position. I don't hold it because I do think we have parallel interest. However, there is an argument to be made that a nation is not designed to advocate in the well-being of the entire planet, because it will sacrifice its own population in order to preserve the well-being of the entire planet. A
Correct.
nation state
I agree
is
with that.
oftentimes, well, actually, originally, is intended exclusively to advocate in its own nation's interest.
Amen.
It's like having, it's like in the legal system, it's like having a combative legal system. We have a combative legal system because we want defense attorneys and prosecutors to advocate the most aggressive case possible in order to achieve a result that is ultimate for the defense attorney, ultimately that's best for the client, and for the prosecutor, what's ultimately best for the state. And through that competition, we ultimately achieve some level of harmony. What I'm advocating for is, I think there's what's called like an inquisitorial model of justice or something like that. I think it's in Germany. They don't have a combative model. The defense attorney is actually not designed to forward the best case possible to get their client the minimum amount of state. They actually are just pursuing truth. But truth is very difficult when bias is natural. And so there's flaws with the inquisitorial model as well. So I'm basically advocating for America to have like a balanced approach between its citizens and the world. But that's ultimately because I view our fates as intertwined.
You know that meme about like conservative morality versus progressive morality, and it's like the rings and where they put moral consideration?
Yeah.
I think the conservative one is more correct than the progressive one.
Is more correct?
Is more correct. It is
no,
okay
I agree.
and necessary to love your children more than other people's children. Now, if that makes me conservative, you call me whatever you want.
Right.
Then your nation, or then your, outer inner.
Yeah, no.
nation.
The hierarchy of morality in the Marine Corps is God, country, core. But obviously this is propaganda that you're saying in boot camp. But the whole point is that like you have prioritization. It's not whether or not you can empathize, sympathize, love, or even care for the stranger. It's just that you prioritize your effort based off of your sphere of influence and sphere of impact. I think we can do both, though. I think the United States is powerful enough to do both.
Maybe. Would be really bad if we had a three-front war with Russia, China, and Iran all at once. That would not be good.
Well, the good news is Russia can't make it out of its back door. But
True.
There are we have hit 1 hour 42.
Yeah.
And the only reason why we did that is because you're so intensely interesting that I wanted to make sure that they had your fully articulated thoughts. But for the VOD viewers, I want to make sure that they have something that's consumable where they don't get scared by a 3 or 4 hour VOD.
Good.
So if you're comfortable for now, I would like you to share your final thoughts and also shout out who you are, where people can find you. And then I'll talk to chat, and then I'm going to wrap up my stream as well.
I am Paul. PF Jung is a channel. I believe in glory and freedom and justice and righteousness.
Based.
Also, the big, beautiful bill just passed, much to my dismay.
Same.
Thomas Massey did not formulate a strong enough coalition.
Hey, at least he tried.
I'm going to campaign for Thomas Massey in 2026. I think that's what
yeah,
I'm doing.
no, at least he tried. At least he tried to live up to his morals compared to other people who just broke instantaneously.
Pathetic. Truly pathetic.
Anyway. All right, brother. It was awesome catching up with you. I'm looking forward to the next one. Have a great day. I'm going to go have fun with chat.
You as well. Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th.
Godspeed. Peace.
All right. I'm going to chat with my chat. We're going to wrap up. And then quick reminder, like the stream. Share it with your friends if you thought this was interesting. Comment in the chat. There's lots of really cool people. Super chats if you got them. They're not required, but they're always appreciated. Become a member or gift memberships. Not required, always appreciated. And then also watch the VOD so I get that sweet, sweet AdSense. Magni por Bjornson says, I left Destiny stream for this. No regrets. Listen, I get it. We're not as popular as some of the bigger streamers, but do you really want to watch other people read Wikipedia articles or read news articles or listen to like a video game commentary for hours on end? This isn't all criticism of Steven. It could be critical of other people. Or do you want to have interesting, deep philosophical conversations? And that'll tell you whether or not you want to come and hang out in my stream or somebody else's stream. Slater says, Connor is way too comfy with the foreign government controlling our policy. Well, that's because I think our policy is aligned. AKA Batasui says, you got to look up crude oil reserves. U.S. has only 5 years stewards of our own supplies. I believe you, brother. Pachydermis says oil is a globally traded commodity. It goes up if globally it goes up. Yes. That was my point, is that if the Middle East and North Africa destabilizes because we withdraw and all those countries go to war, we're still fucked. Slater says our actions in the Middle East are because of Zog, not oil. I disagree, Slater. Clearly, this is one of your first streams. Scrolling, looking for anybody says. Gazbaz says, Connor supports Destiny. He'd readily support the Ayatollah. Dude, I want debt speculation for my Uber Eats. No. Sacred Snow says, I don't think PF is too far right. I think he's contrarian and sweeps for Trump. It is consistently wrong on who's lesser of evil. Well, I didn't hear that in this stream. Conservative liberalism says prayer is allowed in school. It just can't be teacher administration led. Interesting. Coffee Maker says, how deep does he need it? What a hoe. Oh, I love it. DD22E says, oh, I heard about this guy. Cool. Cicero says, makes you wonder, what is Stephen Miller's home? Why? Because he advocates for Israel so aggressively? Yeah, I don't know. And Manuel Randon says, challenge PF Jung to an AoE 2 match. I should have. I'll DM him later. Beef Supreme says, hell yeah, based. Americans are the chosen ones. Beef Supreme says, glory be to the USA. True. Conservative liberalism says, Judaism is the underpinning of Israel and it's illiberal. We compromise our own morality by forever propping them up, often solely. I believe in Judeo-Christian cultural cross-pollination. I think that's possible. Sacred Snow says, surprise, 99% of the GOP are spineless cucks. Yep. Cicero says, sadly, no McCain's left in Congress. Well, maybe I'll run eventually. And I won't be as much of a war hawk as McCain, but I'll be more pragmatic about foreign power. Puzzle says, just missed the combo. Bummer. We'll watch later. Yeah, it'll be a VOD. Unork says, I like you both, based. Magni Bjornsson says, magnificent Thor Bjornsson son. Appreciate you, brother. Conservative liberalism says, if oil is the core of our alignment, let's all pray that Helion sets us free. Well, I don't think that our alignment with Israel, the core is oil. I think that they provide us intel, defense industrial secrets, microchips, and what's another one? Intel, military industrial complex technology, microchips. Oh, and then also we feel guilty about World War II. I think all Europeans feel pretty guilty because we collectively, and what I mean by that is people descended from Europeans. I'm Irish. I personally did not participate in the Holocaust. However, European descended people wiped out a third of the population of international Jewish folk 2 generations ago. And I think we feel a little bit guilty about that, which is why we kind of support the state of Israel. We feel bad about a third of their people getting wiped out. Cicero says, I think they invented the trophy system for tanks too. Yeah, and the trophy system is badass and wildly complicated. DD22E says, like, unironically, if Destiny beats DeSantis, it would be hilarious. Yeah. Conservative liberalism says, guilt is the glue that binds us. Solid foundation. True. Cicero says, Israeli defense industry is pretty good. Yep. Ripe for manipulation, I guess. DD22E says, like, imagine him debating DeSantis combatively. That would be fire content at minimum. Sacred Snow says, if you want to stop being involved in the Middle East, go campaign for nuclear power. Yes, there are still oil products besides power, but will significantly reduce our need. Yeah, that's why I like thorium. That's why I like fusion. That's why I like, I love focusing on, I feel like our culture has a bottleneck right now. And the 2 that I can think of is raw materials for robotics and energy. And so effectively, like, battery technology research and thorium and fusion would be the 3 tech trees that I would focus on, that I would feel would open up a shitload of other tech trees. I think the focus on AI is actually misplaced. So, yeah. All right. So, I parasocially love you guys. We actually did peak out at 70, which is pretty good for competing with everybody else in the late afternoon on Valor. And I didn't tweet it out and I didn't do anything else like that. So, honestly, that's like a pretty good stream for us numbers-wise. So I'm happy. I'm very happy. So yeah. Boog says, Destiny is an idea guy. I don't see him as a political leader. It requires a different set of skills. Yeah, probably, because implementation, talking about policy versus implementing policy are 2 different things. Cannibalist Gecko says, I think your take on Mossadegh in Iran is off. I'm not super read up on it, but he seemed much more interested in a democratic civil society. Well, yeah, honestly, Cannibalistic Gecko, I'm not going to lie. You are right to be skeptical of my claim. I have no idea if Mossadegh was friendly with the Soviet Union or friendly with Maoist China? I have no idea. I would actually have to Google it in order to reaffirm that talking point more aggressively. Boris says Israel is the best market tool for U.S. weapons. Well, not just that. The way that I see it is we give them $3.2 billion in cash per year, which is not that much of the budget. Then they guarantee to buy and use our weapons. They get to pick from our military industrial complex market, and they are effectively always at war. So since they're always at war, we effectively get perpetual field testing of the best weapons, and we get to keep Israel as an ally and a high-tech, mixed economy capitalist democracy. Unork says, interestingly, the high energy costs of AI could help drive the efforts of better energy production based. Tankspec says, when can I start installing some cyberware? I don't know. Sacred Snow says, fission is usable in its current state as well. Although I think they said that we only have like 300 years of like plutonium and uranium. We've made the waste problem negligible. It's definitely not the end all be all, but it could work as a transition. Yeah. I would use fission as a transition into thorium and into fusion for sure. So Magni says, thanks for the stream. See you later. See you, bud. Thanks for hanging out. AKA Badasui says, Connor, Israel is also a huge thorn in the side of the Islamic Caliphate, so we'll support them for that as well. Yep. Jonah says, I missed the morning stream. Still feeling sick, but I'm glad I got to catch one. Good combo. Well, thanks, man. Good to see you. Good to see you. All right. I parasocially love you guys. I'm out. Have a beautiful day. I'll see you tomorrow.